Sorry there, guys. Just want to show a little bit of the progress that I've made on the Mud Racer build that I'm using the Gelande 2 axles for. This is not the chassis that I'm going to be using. This is just a mock-up chassis. I add and take stuff off from the mock-ups as I start finding out little issues with the design and things that I need to do for the final product. The last thing I did was create this mounting spot here so that I could put the motor and transmission in there. This I guess a quick overview of what it is. I'm using the stock Gelande 2 the RC4 drive 1/18 axles. They're the metal axles. This vehicle is only going to be rear wheel drive. Paddles are made to mimic the original ones that are used in the vehicle that I'm trying to copy. These front tires are also a copy of that. Right now everything is 3D printed. They will be 3D printed for the final version because it's going to be running in mud anyways. But I may make another version of this front one just to ride around, where I'll put an O-ring right here in the middle, and then that'll be rubber, meeting the floor. But for the mud, this is fine. I did have to make a lot of changes to the original Gelande, of course. I had to make this servo mount so that servo could be on the axle, and I also had to reverse the steering on the axle to be behind the axle steering. All of that was accomplished by this mount, because the mount not only holds the stock servo in place, but it also holds the upper links. And I went ahead and used the same bars that come for the front, the steering bars, but this one right here, I had to put a slight bend in it because on the rear side of this axle, it's a little bit more narrow. So for you to be able to keep the tires true, you have to put a slight tiny bend on here. I don't know if you could tell that this is not straight. It has a tiny little bend in the middle. I mean, it's very minimal, but it does make a difference, so that the tires are not, pointing outwards. Let me see, not pointing inwards in the front, when you keep it the same length. I also created this shields here that's covered, because I went ahead and took the gear off from the differential and all the axles as well, so that the tires can run freely, the front tires. And I designed and printed these covers for it. Now you might ask, oh man, that's kind of flat. Well, there's a reason for that. I wanted it to be flush with the servo so that I could save as much space in the front as possible, because the front of the body itself, because it's a body that resembles the Jeep, comes pretty low, so I didn't want it to interfere with what the axle is. The original vehicle does not have this big ball in the front. It's just a straight axle for the front suspension. So I had to do the best that I could, because I didn't want to create just an axle for this build. I wanted to use the metal axle just in case that anybody wanted to build their own. They could use the stock axle, but they would need to. They don't need to, but it does help to have these covers, because you will have to remove the rear part because it sticks out too much and it would interfere with the servo at some point. Also, this transmission that I put in here, this is a transmission. It's a reduction gearbox that you get with the 130 motors that you get from eBay. I had to do some changes to it to be able to adapt it to this Toro motor. This is the 6200 kV motor. It's a 1/18 scale version, and like I said, I had to adapt it so that it would mate into this. I had to cut the shaft a little bit and press the pinion that came with the original 130 motor that goes in here to make that fit. And then I had to file down the output shaft because it was too big to fit inside of the drive shafts from Gelande. And I also had to drill a hole for the set pin on that shaft, and that is a hardened shaft, so you need, you know, pretty good drill bits to be able to go through it, and you have to be very careful not to break it. Motor, I wanted it to sit as low as possible because the body, I didn't want to interfere with the look of the body. Initially I wanted to put the motor all the way up in the front, but because of the transmission and the length of this motor, it turned out to be really long. And quite honestly, by putting it way up here, I wasn't going to save much, just pretty much the distance of the transmission here. So I decided not to bring it forward, because then that would have caused an issue with the length of the drive shafts, and I would have had to extend those. So instead I just decided to put it here. I mean, the difference is minimal. I will be moving this forward a little bit to give it a little bit of room so that I could put the ESC in there. And receiver, I want to kind of fit them in there in that box so that they'll be hidden, and hopefully the tube, you know, chassis will be visible very nicely with nothing out, you know, sticking out there. Does it work? Of course it works. Come on, I wouldn't show it if it didn't. So let me turn it on real quick, have it go through the setup. Okay, so now it's all prepped up. Oh, sorry about that. Kind of wanted to show. That's what I'm using. So press here. Alright, if I go like this, it's slow. But obviously you don't want to go slow in this thing. So you want it to go fast. Now it has the ESC has the brake, the drag brake on. I'm going to take that off because you really don't want that on a race. But as you can see, it has plenty of speed. I do want to keep it to where it's still scale, so I don't need this vehicle to do, you know, 100 miles an hour. I want to keep it to where it's scale, and it'll match, you know, what the speed of the original vehicle is. You know, maybe a little bit more just to make it fun. But I feel that probably that speed will be okay. Steering, of course, is functional, so we're good there. And yeah, I mean, the vehicle works so far. Obviously, I'm still really far from finishing it. I still have to design the chassis. It's going to house all of this, and it's going to maximize the space inside of the Jeep cover. And I already have the outside designed. I just have to make this part to where it'll be maximizing the space, and then I'll fit the top and make it look like the vehicle. And after that, then we do all the testing and all that good stuff. Although I may just throw it out there to test it as it is, but I'm not sure. We'll see, because I mean, I would have to tie all this up and everything, and it's gonna get all messy, and then it'll be a little bit harder to work on if it's all dirty. But anyways, that's where the vehicle's at. Shouldn't take me too much longer, you know. Hopefully I'll get enough time to work on it and be able to put this out soon. I have to apologize because a lot of my projects have been delayed, and it's because I've been, you know, a lot of you guys know that I work in the healthcare field and been putting in a lot of time into that, and it's kind of slowed everything down. And plus, you know, my son, you know, with the school the way it was, you know, having to do the classes at home, that kind of slowed me down a whole bunch too. So I'm going to try my best to try and get this one done, because this is mimicking my uncle's vehicle, and I kind of want to have this done so that he can see it and have fun with it and all that good stuff. So I'll try to speed this one up a little bit. Oh, the other thing, shocks. There is extreme motion on these. I do not need this much shock on this vehicle. This vehicle, the way that it's designed, it does not have this much travel on the shocks. It's very minimum. motion on them. So I will be limiting the travel of the shocks, so everything will sit lower, not that low, but probably about that height instead of over here, because you don't really need, you know, all that motion as you're traveling down the track. I mean, look at this. You know, you really want to drive this thing as fast as these things go with all this articulation? Heck no. So I will be limiting that, probably, you know, something like this, if that. Okay, so none of this. This is ridiculous for this. So something like this. So I'll play around with all the shocks and everything to where I'll end up with, you know, probably about 1/2 inch of articulation total. And that should be pretty good for stability. A lot of people are gonna complain about these being 3D printed and hard. If you have any experience with sand paddles at high speeds, they expand, and that expansion will cause this not only to give me uneven traction on both sides, because none of, you know, both will not expand at the same rate, so it causes the vehicle to kind of veer off to one side and or the other. So that's why I like to do them like these. I mean, at least on these smaller scale. And also, when they expand, they hit the body and the mud guards. So I don't want to have that happen where it's hitting the body and wrecking it and pretty much, you know, limiting its speed. So these tires being hard and non-expandable will give, you know, just a straight shot. It's just gonna pretty much depend on how well I can steer it, if I can keep these tires on the ground, because if it's got enough traction and speed from that motor, which we've already seen with the Fat Girl, because that's one of the motors that I use, even though this one's faster than I had over there. If it starts doing this, then I'm just gonna have to pray that it can go straight. But if I get some traction on the front ones, then I'll be able to steer it. Anyways, wow, this got pretty long. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I'll try to finish this up soon. Thanks.